Before you step into this story, I need you to take a breath. What you are about to read is not just a confession, it is a wound, torn open, and left bleeding on the page. This is not a fairy tale, and there is no perfect ending waiting at the altar. It is a journey through sacrifice, betrayal, and the night that shattered everything I thought I knew about love, family, and myself. If you choose to continue, know this: once you see what happened, you will never look at a wedding the same way again. I still remember the exact second, and the world tilted beneath my feet, the silk of my wedding dress clinging heavy and wet against my skin. Though I hadn't stepped near water, it was sweat, fear, and something darker, an instinct clawing from inside me, whispering that what was supposed to be the happiest night of my life was already being ripped apart. The poison had been dripping for years, slow, almost invisible. My family had painted this marriage as salvation. Think of your future, Menina. My mother had whispered countless times, her manicured nails grazing my arm, her eyes glittering with a hunger that wasn't mine. They called him successful. They called him stability. What they never called it was a cage. For 3 years I had been sculpted, little by little, into the perfect bride. My father sold a piece of land outside Ribeiro Preto to pay for the grand hall. 120,000 reais for a single night. My mother spent hours bargaining with decorators, arguing over orchids or lilies, as if flowers could disguise the truth. Every choice wasn't mine, it was theirs, and every time I tried to resist, the manipulation sharpened. You don't want to shame us, do you? After all we've done? After all we've sacrificed? The word sacrifice was their weapon, thrown like a dagger, until guilt sank so deep that I began to doubt my own wit. By the time the wedding arrived, I had stopped fighting. I had become a doll in white satin, a silent character in their story. But nothing could have prepared me for what he would do that night under the glittering lights, with the cameras flashing and the guests clapping as if it were theater. His smile never wavered, his voice low as he leaned, the scent of his cologne making me nauseous. You're ready for the real part, aren't you? He whispered, as though marriage was nothing but a stage for his control. My stomach turned, but I forced a smile, nodding for the photographer. My lips burned from fake smiles, my jaw ached from pretending joy. But the truth pulsed beneath my skin like fire. I was not safe. And when he pulled me away from the crowd, down the corridor lined with golden frames, into the silence of a locked room, I realized my life was about to split into before that night and after. The room smelled of polished wood and expensive whiskey, the kind my father used to buy only on Christmas. But here it was stacked carelessly on a mahogany shelf, as if abundance erased meaning. He closed the door behind us with a soft click that sounded louder than the orchestra outside. I remember staring at my reflection in the mirror above the dresser, a bride, flawless on the surface, but her eyes betrayed her wide, terrified, pleading with herself to wake up. Who brings contracts to a wedding? But as he slid the document toward me, his eyes steady, I understood this had been orchestrated long before the vows. A transfer of property, accounts, investments under my family's name, everything tied to me, now meant to belong to him. It wasn't just marriage, it was conquest. My hands trembled when I touched the folder. Names, signatures, numbers that made my head spin. Land worth nearly 400,000 reis. The afternoons I spent working in my mother's store for no pay, smiling at rude customers, sweeping floors until my back ached. The nights I studied law books in secret, hoping education could be my escape. The family dinners, where every decision about my life was made without my voice. And now, the culmination of it all, to give away everything, not just the property, not just the money, but myself. I felt small again, like when my father raised his voice, like when my mother's silence became colder than any punishment. I looked at the door, but it was locked. My family was just down the hall, clinking glasses, toasting to a happiness I couldn't even recognize. Would they even believe me if I screamed? Or would they smile tighter, telling me to be grateful? The pen was heavy in my hand. My chest heaved as if I were drowning in the dress itself, suffocated by layers of fabric and expectation. I wanted to run, but my feet stayed planted, betrayal anchoring me to the floor. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. Do it for us. Do it for them. Show me you're not like the others. That line cut deepest because all my life I had been trained to not be like the others, to behave, to sacrifice, to endure. The pen slipped from my hand and rolled across the dresser, stopping against the edge like it to refuse to obey. He bent to pick it up, slow, deliberate, as if savoring my hesitation. I stood frozen, every muscle in me taut, my pulse a hammer in my throat. But then something shifted. It was the way he looked at me, not impatient, not surprised, but certain. Like a man watching a script unfold exactly as rehearsed. That certainty was my first crack of clarity. This wasn't a spontaneous whim, but standing there, the ink drying in the air, I realized my future had already been sold. I saw it all unraveling in flashes. The day my mother forced me to cancel my job interview in 2019 because it didn't look right for a bride-to-be. The night my father scolded me for questioning the engagement. His words sharp as knives. You don't know the value of sacrifice. You think life is about love? Life is about survival. No, querida. You're the bridge. You're the guarantee. Your father knew exactly what he was offering. The air thickened, heavier than the perfume clinging to my veil. My chest tightened with betrayal, so sharp it felt physical. Memories stabbed my father's proud smile as he walked me down the aisle, my mother's tears glistening under the church lights. I had believed those tears were love. Now I saw them for what they were: relief. Relief that their bargain was sealed. My fingers dug into the dresser until the wood bit my skin. grounding me in the only truth that mattered. I had been deceived, not just by him, but by the very people who raised me. For the first time that night, I didn't feel fear. I felt rage. It surged hot through my veins, burning away the guilt they had layered onto me for years. Rage at the manipulation disguised as care, the endless talk of sacrifice, the constant reminders that I owed them everything. Because in that moment, beneath the weight of silk and betrayal, I understood something that changed everything. If he and my family had built this night on lies, then I wasn't the weak, obedient daughter they thought I was. I was something else, something they didn't see coming. The pen felt like a weapon in my hand, sharper than any blade, though it carried only ink. My pulse thundered, my throat dry, but something inside me refused to bend. "Don't play games," he said, his voice low, almost coaxing, like a parent warning a child. But I wasn't a child anymore. I met his eyes in the mirror, my reflection torn and trembling, but my stare steady. "I won't." For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The music outside faded, the clinking glasses disappeared, even the weight of the dress became distant. All that existed was his face-shifting amusement curdling into disbelief, disbelief hardening into anger. The words hit me like familiar blows, echoes of my father's voice, of my mother's sighs. But instead of shrinking, I felt something crack open inside me. They had built their empire on my silence, but silence was no longer an option. I yanked my arm free, the sudden motion knocking over the whiskey glass. It shattered against the floor, amber liquid spreading like fire across the wood. The sound drew his eyes to the door, panic flickering there, as if someone might have heard. I looked at him, my voice calm despite the chaos in my chest. "If you want me to sign, then let's do it in front of everyone. Let's show them what this marriage really is." His face went pale, the confidence draining like blood from a wound. He knew I meant it. He knew that if I stepped into that ballroom holding those papers, everything would collapse: the celebration, the illusion, the bargain. And in that instant, the power shifted. He tried to recover, to sneer, to call me dramatic. It was about erasing me, reducing me to currency in an agreement I never chose. And the only way to survive was to do the impossible in return, defy them all. The knock on the door came like thunder, sharp and sudden, vibrating through the silence we had carved inside that room. His eyes darted to mine, wide, calculating, like a predator caught mid-hunt. I didn't move. For the first time, I didn't shrink. He whispered harshly, "Don't you dare open that door." But the truth is, he no longer controlled me. I turned the handle. The hallway lights flooded in, bright and merciless, cutting through the dimness of the room. My cousin blinked at me, then at him, sensing the tension, though not yet understanding it. Behind her, the murmur of the party stretched like a wave, champagne laughter spilling against the walls. I stepped out, folder clutched in my hands, my veil slightly torn from his grip, my face pale but burning with a fire I couldn't hide. Tutto certo, she asked again, her eyes darting between us. I wanted to scream the truth right there, but my throat locked. Instead, I did something quieter, more devastating. I held up the folder. My cousin frowned, reaching for it, and I let her see just the first page, just enough for confusion to turn into shock. Her hand flew to her mouth. The chandelier light seemed harsher, the laughter more brittle. My mother approached first, her smile fixed like porcelain, but her eyes flashing with warning. "What are you doing?" she hissed through clenched teeth, her hand tightening on my arm as though she could pull me back into silence. I lifted the folder between us. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice low but steady. For a second, her mask cracked the tiniest flicker of guilt. That was enough. The orchestra stumbled on a wrong note. His threat slithered into my ear, but the words no longer chained me, because humiliation was exactly what I intended. Not for revenge, not for spectacle, but for survival, for truth, for the girl in the mirror who deserved to exist outside their lies. And as the music faltered, as whispers swelled into silence, I took a step toward the microphone at the center of the hall. The spotlight followed me, blinding, hot, heavy. Even the chandelier above seemed to hum with anticipation. I could hear my own heartbeat through the speakers, loud, relentless, as if the whole world had been waiting for this moment. He stood a few steps behind me, smiling too wide, his hands clasped as though in prayer to anyone else. He looked like the proud groom watching his bride give a toast. But I felt his stare burning through my back, his whispered threat still coiled in my ear. "If you humiliate me tonight, you'll regret it forever." I took a shaky breath, the veil brushing my lips, the lace sticking to my skin where sweat had gathered. My throat tightened, but the rage inside me pushed the words out before I could stop them. This marriage was never about love. The murmur began immediately, like a ripple cutting through still water. Chairs shifted. A woman gasped. This wasn't a marriage. This was a deal. And I was the price. The whispers swelled into chaos, guests turning to each other, heads shaking, voices rising. Some disbelieved, others already piecing together fragments of gossip they'd ignored for years. My father took a step forward, his voice booming across the hall. "Enough. Voca no sabo que esta dizendo." But the way his eyes darted, the way his face flushed, betrayed him. I stared at him, my throat raw. "Don't I?" You knew. The illusion shattered in real time, fragments of lies falling like glass across the polished floor. For a split second, silence reclaimed the room. The kind of silence that suffocates, that demands a choice: bury the truth or let it rise. My mother's eyes locked on mine, pleading without words, as if begging me to stop, to save what little was left of their reputation. But I had already crossed the line. There was no going back. And for the first time in my life, as the chaos rose around me, I felt something like freedom. Fragile, terrifying, blinding, but freedom still. The ballroom, once a theater of glittering illusions, became a battlefield. Voices clashed over one another, some rising in outrage, others in disbelief. My veil slipped off my head as I pulled away from his grip, the delicate lace crumpling to the polished floor, forgotten. He was a man cornered, his schemes unraveling in front of his world. My mother tried to intervene, her voice trembling, her hands clutching my father's arm. "Please, calma. Don't make a scene." But her words were useless. The scene was already raging. Guests stood from their chairs, some with curiosity gleaming in their eyes, others with disgust. The whispers turned sharper. She was sold. The contract, did you see it? More Deus, Q Virgen ha. Because without me, without them, you are nothing. His words hit me like stone. The same stones my parents had thrown for years, reminders that I was small, dependent, powerless. But something had changed. The crowd had seen too much. And for the first time, I wasn't alone in my truth. My cousin, the same one who had knocked on the door, stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "I saw the papers," she said, her voice shaking but carrying. "She's telling the truth." The orchestra had gone silent, their instruments abandoned. The champagne towers stood untouched, the cake forgotten. What was meant to be the pinnacle of my family's pride had turned into a stage for their undoing. And in the center of it all stood me, no longer the obedient daughter, no longer the doll in white satin, but a woman holding the truth in her trembling hand. I could feel his rage burning beside me, his whisper, a hiss only I could hear. "You'll regret this for the rest of your life." But I didn't look at him. I couldn't, because for the first time, the regret wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. The night was collapsing, the chandelier lights glaring down like a spotlight on the ruins of everything they had built. And though my heart raced, though my hands shook, I knew this was only the beginning. I stood in the middle of it all, the folder clutched to my chest, my dress heavy, suffocating, the satin dragging across the marble like chain. My father's voice cracked again, trying to reclaim control. "Enough. This ends now. Give me those papers." He reached for me, but I stepped back, the microphone still in my hand, its cord tangling around my arm like a lifeline. "You had no right," I spat, my voice raw. "You gave me away as if I was a deed, a title, a number in a bank." "Enough theatrics," he snarled, his perfect groom's mask on. "You think this makes you strong? This makes you a fool. Do you know what happens to women who betray their families? You'll end up with nothing, not even a name." His words cracked like a whip, but I noticed something else in his eyes. Fear of losing control, fear of exposure. The lion had been cornered, and for once, he knew it. It was then that my cousin moved again. She came to my side, placing a hand lightly on my arm. The unspoken understanding that obedience had always been demanded of us, and that defiance always carried a price. My father shouted again, his voice breaking this time, pleading instead of commanding. "Fill her, poor favor. Think of what you're doing. You'll ruin us. His words echoed across the hall, bouncing against the walls lined with gold. But instead of guilt, I felt a strange calm, maybe for the first time in my life. He knew if he touched me now, in front of all these eyes, the last shred of his image would shatter. For a man like him, appearance was everything. And appearance was gone. The night was over. The wedding was no longer a union, it was a funeral for lies. And as I stood there, trembling, hollow, yet fiercely alive, I understood that the girl who had walked into that ballroom was gone forever. The morning after felt unreal, as if I had woken up in someone else's life. My father's name glowing in red. Unknown numbers from journalists already sniffing around the story. I turned the phone face down, my chest tightening with every vibration, but it didn't stop. The world had already begun to feast on the scandal. By noon, the headlines were everywhere. Wedding collapses in scandal. Heiress refuses to sign family deal at the altar. Some used my name. Some didn't. But the details were there, the property, the contract, the scene under the chandelier. And yet I felt exposed, as if every passerby could see straight into me. As if every horn and every engine carried my name on its breath. When my cousin arrived, she didn't knock gently. She pushed the door open, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red. "It's worse than we thought," she said, dropping her bag on the table. She scrolled through her phone, showing me posts, comments. The endless echo chamber of social media. Some called me brave, others called me selfish. We didn't move for a long moment until the bell rang again, longer, harder. My stomach churned as I walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw him, the groom, his suit wrinkled now, his hair disheveled, but his smile intact. That smile, the same one he wore for the cameras, chilled me more than his anger ever could. "Open the door," he said, his voice muffled through the wood, but clear enough to make my hands shake. "We need to talk. You can't run from this forever." And as the knocking grew louder, shaking the door, I realized the night of my wedding had not destroyed me, it had remade me into something sharper, something dangerous, something they would never control again. Nights still feel longer than they should. Sometimes I wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I can still hear the music from that ballroom, the violin swelling, the applause ringing. The moment when the chandelier light burned down on me like an executioner's torch. She didn't condemn me. She simply erased, as though I had died that night along with the illusion she had spent her life building. The groom, he tried for weeks. Messages, visits, veiled threats that slipped under my door like poison. But every attempt only confirmed what I already knew. He hadn't loved me, not once. To him, I was leverage, a key, a possession. When he realized I wouldn't bend, wouldn't sign, he vanished, retreating into the shadows, where men like him always find new prey. The job I had once been forced to abandon, I applied again, walking into the interview with trembling hands but steady eyes. The law books I had studied in secret became my companions again, not chained. Every page reminded me that knowledge was power, and power, finally, was mine too. And though the whispers still follow me online, in the street, even in the hushed tones of relatives who speak my name like a curse, I no longer bow under their weight. Let them whisper.